The first lie Ryan told that week was to the security camera in his apartment hallway. At 11:57 on Wednesday night, he looked straight at the small black lens above his door while the pounding started on the other side and said out loud to nobody at all, "I'm not here." The pounding came again, harder. Not a drunk neighbor, not a delivery mistake. Whoever stood outside his door wanted in badly enough to split the wood. Ryan set the half-eaten sandwich down on the kitchen counter and crossed the living room in 3 quick steps. The apartment was small enough that nothing took longer than that. 1 couch, 1 lamp, 1 narrow window full of Seattle rain, the kind of place where you could hear strangers argue through drywall and know exactly when the guy upstairs dropped his phone. He unlocked the deadbolt but kept the chain on. And when he opened the door 3 inches, rain blew in first. Then Emma. For 1 stunned second, his mind did not know where to put her. She belonged to an older version of his life. Holiday dinners, sharp laughter from the kitchen, paint under her fingernails, Claire's younger sister rolling her eyes at everything and everyone like she had been born already tired of the world. Now she was standing in the hallway, soaked through, hair plastered to her cheeks, holding a thick envelope against her chest like it might float if she let go. "Ryan," she said, and her voice cracked right down the middle, "please don't shut the door." He hadn't seen her in 5 years, not since the divorce papers, not since Claire packed the last box and told him some people were too ordinary to be loved for long. He took the chain off, and Emma stepped inside without another word. Rainwater slid from her coat to the floor. She didn't look around, didn't ask how he had been, didn't pretend this was anything but an emergency. She sat on the couch like her legs had borrowed their last bit of strength from pure panic. Ryan closed the door slowly. "Does Claire know you're here?" Emma's head came up fast. "No, that's not what I asked. She can't know." Her fingers tightened around the envelope. "Nobody can." He stayed standing. "Emma, it's midnight. I know what time it is. That makes one of us." She almost smiled, but the expression died before it reached her eyes. Those eyes were red and swollen, not the neat kind of crying people did after sad movies. This looked older, messier, and like she had been trying not to fall apart for days and was finally losing the argument. Ryan nodded toward the envelope. "What happened?" Emma opened it with shaking hands and pulled out a folded set of papers. She held them out. "I need you to sign these." He took them. Marriage license. Her name was already filled in. His apartment went so quiet he could hear the rain tapping the window behind him, steady and cold. Ryan looked up. "No," Emma swallowed. "Please, just no." He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You disappear for 5 years, show up close to midnight looking like you ran through a storm, and your plan is this? If I'm not married by Saturday, they'll take my son." That stopped him. Not because of the words, because of the way she said son. Not dramatic, not manipulative, not loud. And it sounded like she had already rehearsed life after losing him, and couldn't survive the thought a second time. Ryan lowered the papers. "Your what?" "My son, Owen, he's 3. He stared at her. In all the bad scenarios his brain had built in the last 60 seconds, none of them included Emma having a child. She pressed her palms together so tightly her knuckles went pale. "Please let me explain before you say no again." He sat in the chair across from her, still holding the paper like it might burn him if he relaxed. "Start talking." Emma did not tell the story in a straight line. It came in pieces, dragged out of her like glass. A man named Jordan. A year together, a baby, a promise. Then a disappearance so complete it might as well have been death. "He left when Owen was 6 months old," she said, and staring at the coffee table, instead of him. Not a fight, not a warning. He just stopped showing up. And now he has money. Her mouth twisted. And timing. 3 months ago, Jordan had returned. Older, polished, married to a surgeon, carrying apologies with the smooth edges sanded down. The court gave him supervised visits. That had been the beginning. Then came the lawyer, then the filings, then the argument that Emma was unstable because she worked nights teaching art classes, lived in a small apartment, and raised her son without a husband. Ryan rubbed a hand over his face. And your lawyer actually told you marriage would help? She told me judges like stability. Emma finally looked at him. On paper, I lose. He looked down at the blank line, waiting for his name. Why me? The answer came too fast to be invented. Because you listen before you decide who someone is. His eyes narrowed. Emma drew a slow breath. Back when you were married to Claire, everyone in my family had an opinion about me. What I dropped, what I ruined, what I should have become by then. You were the only one who ever asked if I was okay and waited for the real answer. Ryan barely remembered the conversation. A kitchen, too much noise. Emma leaning against the counter, angry at everyone, pretending she didn't care. He had asked one question because nobody else had. Apparently she had carried it for 5 years. That's not enough reason to marry someone, he said. It is when your options are down to one person who won't use your fear against you. The words landed badly because he knew she was right about that much. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, rain turned the parking lot lights into long smears of silver. His life had become small on purpose after the divorce. Work, runs at 6 a.m, leftovers, silence. He had built everything around not being surprised anymore. Behind him, Emma said quietly, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to help me keep my child. He closed his eyes. That was the problem. If she had made it only about her, maybe he could have refused. But a 3-year-old boy was sitting somewhere in this city without any idea. Strangers in expensive clothes were arguing over where he would sleep next month. Ryan turned back. If I sign this, you tell me everything. No cleaned-up version. No late surprises in a courtroom. Yes. If I'm walking into this with you, I don't get treated like a prop. You won't? And if at any point this stops being about Owen and starts being about some legal stunt your lawyer cooked up, I'm out. Emma nodded once. Fair. He looked at her for a long moment, then at the papers again. It was a terrible idea. That part stayed true no matter how long he stared. Still, another thought had started moving beneath it, quieter and harder to ignore. If he sent her back into the rain, and she lost that boy, he would hear the sound of this knock for the rest of his life. He picked up the pen from the table. Emma did not speak. Ryan signed. The next morning arrived too early and too gray. At 8 o'clock sharp, they stood in the courthouse with wet cuffs, tired eyes, and the expression of two people about to do something neither of them could fully defend in daylight. The clerk behind the glass barely glanced up. Names, birth dates, addresses, prior marriages. Ryan checked yes, Emma checked no. The woman stamped the form, slid it back, and said, "Congratulations," in the same tone people used for parking validation. And that was it. No vows, no rings, no witnesses with cameras, just fluorescent lights humming overhead, and a legal line crossed in under half an hour. Outside, cold wind pushed at them as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Emma stood very still. Thank you. Ryan shoved his hands into his coat pockets. Don't thank me yet. She gave him a tired look. You really know how to make a bride feel special. That caught him off guard enough to pull half a laugh out of him. Now, it vanished when she said, You should meet Owen today. Ryan's shoulders stiffened. Today? The judge may ask about the home, about you. He can't see a stranger and think it makes sense. There was no arguing with that. Emma's apartment sat in an older building with narrow stairs and radiators that hissed like they held grudges. Inside, the place was small, but alive in a way Ryan's apartment never was. Paintings leaned against the walls. Tiny socks hung from a drying rack by the heater. The refrigerator was crowded with a child's drawings and crooked magnets. A blue sneaker slept on its side by the couch. Life was everywhere. Not polished life, not staged life, used life. Emma set her keys down. My aunt has Owen until this afternoon. Ryan nodded, but his attention snagged on a paper crown taped to the wall, glitter glue, and one bent corner. A child had made that with complete seriousness and expected the room to honor it. He didn't know why that hit him harder than the courthouse did. Emma was talking now, opening folders, explaining the lawyer, the hearing, the questions they would need to answer, where they had supposedly reconnected, why they kept it quiet, what version of the truth would survive contact with a hostile courtroom. Ryan listened, asked practical questions, wrote details down. But under all of it, another clock had started, a smaller one, measured not in court dates or signatures, in the sound of footsteps coming back up the stairs. Late afternoon light had just begun to thin when voices appeared in the hallway outside. Emma went still. Her hand flattened against the edge of the table. "That's him," she said. The doorknob turned. And for the first time since he signed his name, Ryan felt something more dangerous than fear. He felt responsible. The door opened and a small boy stepped in with one mitten half off and a plastic dinosaur clutched in his fist. He stopped when he saw Ryan. Not frightened, just alert in the quiet, serious way some children had when they were trying to understand a room before deciding how to feel in it. Emma crossed to him first. She crouched, kissed his damp hair, and helped with the mitten. "Hey, Bug." Owen leaned into her for 1 second, then pointed at Ryan. "Who's that?" There it was. Not a court question. Not a lawyer's trap. A child asking the one thing that actually mattered. Emma glanced back at Ryan, and for the first time since she had shown up at his door, he saw something close to helplessness in her face. This is Ryan," she said carefully. "He's going to be with us for a while." Owen studied him with wide brown eyes that missed nothing. Ryan had handled multi-million-dollar project delays with less pressure in his chest than he felt sitting on that couch. He stood, then thought maybe standing looked too formal, so he sat back down. Great start. Emma's aunt came in behind Owen carrying a small backpack decorated with rockets. She was gray-haired, tired-looking, and not subtle at all. Her eyes landed on Ryan and stayed there, so she knew exactly who he was. "Afternoon," Ryan said. She handed Emma the backpack. He ate half a sandwich and refused the apple slices. Of course he did. The older woman looked between them once more, taking in the shape of the scene without comment, whatever questions she had, and she was storing them for later. "I'm leaving lasagna in the fridge downstairs tomorrow," she said to Emma. Then to Owen, "Be good for your mama." Owen nodded, still staring at Ryan. When the door shut behind her, the apartment went quiet, in that tender, awkward way quiet can go when everyone is waiting for one person to set the tone. Owen walked closer. Ryan stayed very still. The boy held up the dinosaur. "He bites." "Looks like it," Ryan said. Owen considered this. "He bites bad guys. Then I'll try to stay on his good side." That got the faintest change in expression, not a smile, more like a decision not to dislike him yet. Emma let out a breath so small Ryan almost missed it. Later, while Emma heated soup and cut bread in the kitchen, Owen sat cross-legged on the floor with a box of blocks spread around him like building plans. He lined two pieces up, frowned, knocked them over, and started again. Ryan watched from the couch. Owen looked up. "You can help if you want." It was said with the gravity of a contract offer. Ryan came down to the floor. "Any rules?" "Yes." "Good. I hate working without rules." Owen placed a red block in his palm. "Bottom ones have to be strong." Ryan glanced toward the kitchen. Emma had paused at the stove, watching them. "Smart rule," he said. They built a tower that leaned left, then one that collapsed in the middle, then one wide enough to survive Owen's accidental elbow. The boy did not talk much, but when he did, it came in clean little bursts. Dinosaurs. Preschool. A kid named Mateo who bit people. The moon. And why rain sounded louder at night. By the time dinner was ready, Owen had moved from cautious acceptance to practical ownership. When Emma set bowls on the table, he reached for Ryan's sleeve like this was obvious now and pulled him to his chair. That small hand on his arm did something strange to Ryan's heartbeat. He covered it by asking, "So what happens if I sit in the wrong seat?" Owen gasped. "You can't." Emma almost laughed into the soup pot. After dinner came bath time, then pajamas with tiny green dinosaurs, then one book, then another because the first one had ended too fast. Ryan read from the couch while Owen leaned against his side with the heavy trust children offered before adults had earned it, simply because the room felt safe enough. When the second story ended, Owen was asleep before Emma lifted him, and she carried him to the bedroom with practiced care. Ryan stayed where he was, holding the book open to the last page, listening to the apartment settle around him. He had meant to help for a hearing. That was still the plan. But plans did not usually involve a sleeping child curled against your ribs like he had known you longer than 3 hours. Emma came back quietly and stood by the window. Rain stippled the glass. The city outside was all blurred lights and wet dark. "He doesn't do that with people," she said. Ryan closed the book. "Fall asleep on them? Trust them." She folded her arms, but it looked more like she was holding herself together than keeping warm. "He usually hides behind me for at least a week." Ryan set the book on the table. "Yeah, maybe your dinosaur security test is very effective." She smiled properly this time, and the whole room changed with it. Not brighter exactly, softer. Then the smile faded. "I need to tell you something before tomorrow." He waited. Emma stayed by the window instead of sitting down. "Jordan's lawyer found out about your divorce." Ryan's jaw tightened. "That wasn't hard. He may bring up Claire. He may try to paint you as unstable or say I married a man with failed relationships because I was desperate enough to take anyone." Ryan leaned back, one arm over the couch. "Wouldn't be the first time someone called me a bad investment." Emma turned toward him. "That isn't what I think." "No?" "No." Her voice sharpened. "I came to you because I remembered what it felt like to be seen by you. That's not the same thing as settling." Silence held for a second. Ryan looked down at his hands. He still wore no ring. Neither of them did. They had signed papers, but nothing visible had changed. And yet everything had tilted. "What exactly are we supposed to tell the court?" he asked. Emma crossed back to the table and sat opposite him. She opened the folder again, but her movements were slower now, less frantic than before. "That we ran into each other at Elliott Bay Books 2 months ago. That we got coffee after. That it kept happening." Ryan nodded. "Why did it keep happening?" She met his eyes. "Because talking to you felt easy." That one might actually be true. A faint color touched her face. Convenient. They went over everything again, but this time the details came with texture. Favorite tea. His shellfish allergy. and her habit of painting after midnight when worry wouldn't let her sleep, his early runs, her hatred of mushrooms. The side of the bed each of them would claim if anyone asked. They were building a marriage out of facts and emergency. It should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it started to feel unsettlingly intimate. At some point, Emma put down her pen and rubbed both hands over her face. "I'm tired." "Then stop for tonight." "I can't." "You can for 10 minutes." "I don't know how." Ryan stood, went to the kitchen, poured water into a glass and brought it back. He set it in front of her. "Start by drinking that." Emma looked at the glass like it was a personal insult. Then she obeyed. He sat beside her instead of across from her this time. For a while, neither of them said anything. The radiator hissed, rain tapped, and somewhere in the building somebody dropped something heavy and cursed. Emma stared at the papers on the table. If we lose, he'll make Owen live with him half the time to start. Then more. And eventually he'll try for all of it. Ryan heard the part she didn't say, and Jordan has the money to keep coming back until something breaks. "He won't win," Ryan said. She gave him a tired look. "You can't know that." "No." He rested his forearms on his knees. "But I know this. In that courtroom, they're going to talk about schedules and square footage and income like those things make apparent. So if someone needs to remind them that your son is loved and known and safe with you, I can do that." Emma's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back before they fell. "Why are you being so good to me?" Ryan let out a quiet breath. "And I'm not sure this is about being good." "What is it about?" He looked toward the closed bedroom door down the hall, then back at her. "Maybe I'm tired of watching people leave and calling it normal." Something moved in Emma's face then, not shock, recognition, the kind that made the air feel thinner. She set the glass down carefully. "Ryan." He turned. "When this is over," she said, each word measured, "you don't owe me more than what you agreed to." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, because truth had started pressing harder than strategy, he said, "That might be the problem." Before she could answer, Owen's sleepy voice came from the bedroom. "Mom?" Emma stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. She hurried down the hall. Ryan heard the bedroom door open, then her softer voice, and then Owen mumbling something he couldn't catch. A few seconds later, Emma looked back from the doorway. "Can you come here?" Ryan stood and followed. Owen was sitting up in bed, hair messy, stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. In the dim yellow light of the bedside lamp, he looked smaller than he had all evening. He blinked at Ryan. "You're still here?" "Yeah, buddy, I'm still here." Owen studied him for one quiet second, then lay back down and handed his elephant to Emma like the matter had been settled. Ryan stood in the doorway while Emma tucked the blanket under Owen's chin. By the time she switched off the lamp, Ryan understood something with a certainty that scared him more than the hearing ever would. Tomorrow was not the day everything changed. Everything had already started changing here, in a small apartment, and under a child's half-asleep relief that when he called out, someone stayed. Tomorrow arrived in a courtroom, but the real damage started in the hallway outside it. Jordan was already there when Ryan and Emma stepped off the elevator. He stood beside his lawyer in a dark suit that fit too well, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a paper cup of coffee, like this was any other Thursday. His wife stood near him in a cream coat, polished and calm, the kind of calm that made other people feel underdressed just for breathing near it. Jordan looked at Emma first. Not with guilt, not with regret, with ownership he had not earned. Then his eyes moved to Ryan. "So this is the miracle husband." Emma's hand tightened around the strap of her bag. Ryan felt it before he saw it. He stepped slightly closer to her. Not dramatic, just enough. And Jordan smiled without warmth. Fast work. Ryan could have answered a dozen ways. None of them would help, so he didn't. Emma's lawyer, Michelle, came through the security doors with a folder tucked under her arm, and that particular expression lawyers wore when they were already 3 arguments ahead. "Good," she said quietly. "You're both here. Listen to me." They moved toward the far wall while Jordan's lawyer pretended not to watch. Michelle kept her voice low. "He's going to push 2 things. 1, that the marriage is sudden and strategic. 2, that Jordan offers more stability on paper." "On paper," Emma repeated, like the words tasted bad. "I know." Michelle's tone softened for half a second. "So don't fight the paper. Humanize the life. Give the judge the real shape of Owen's days. That matters." Ryan nodded. Emma did not. And Michelle touched her arm. "Look at me." Emma did. "You are not asking permission to be his mother. You already are." Something in Emma's face steadied. When the courtroom doors opened, cold air met them first. Or maybe it only felt that way. The room was all hard benches and pale walls, and light too bright to be kind. Ryan had spent years in meeting rooms, but this felt different. Meetings were about blame and budgets. This was about a child small enough to need help with his socks. They sat. The judge entered. The hearing began. Jordan's lawyer stood first, and Ryan understood within 30 seconds why Michelle had warned them. The man had the smooth voice of someone who knew how to make cruelty sound reasonable. He spoke of concern, of opportunity, of the benefits of a 2-parent household, and as if Emma had failed some test by not being able to turn abandonment into architecture. Then came the apartment. The 1-bedroom, the evening classes, the money, all of it arranged carefully to make love sound inefficient. When he turned to the marriage, his tone sharpened just enough to show his hand. "Mrs. Torres, you reconnected with Mr. Beck only recently, correct?" Emma sat straight. "Yes." "And within weeks, you married him?" "Yes." "Convenient timing." Michelle rose. "Objection." The judge lifted one hand. "Counselor, ask a question." Jordan's lawyer nodded as if grateful for the correction. He wasn't. "What changed so quickly between you and Mr. Beck that marriage became appropriate?" Emma did not rush. Ryan had noticed that about her the last few days. When she was frightened, she grew more careful, not less. I trusted him. The lawyer gave a tiny smile. "Based on what? A few conversations?" "No." Emma's voice stayed calm. "Based on who he has always been." Jordan shifted in his seat. The lawyer tried another angle. "So this was not a decision influenced by your upcoming custody hearing?" Emma looked straight at him. "Everything in my life is influenced by my son. That is not the same as saying my marriage is fake." For the first time that morning, Ryan saw the judge glance up with interest. Then it was his turn. He took the stand with his pulse hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. He answered the basic questions first. Name, age, work, prior marriage. Then the lawyer moved in. "Mr. Beck, when did you and Mrs. Torres begin seeing each other socially?" "About 2 months ago." "And you married almost immediately?" "We did." "You expect this court to believe that was a romantic decision and not a legal one?" Ryan looked at Emma before he answered. It was not part of the plan. Michelle had told them not to reach for each other with their eyes, but he did it anyway. Then he turned back to the lawyer. "I expect the court to believe that life does not always arrive in the order people approve of." The lawyer smiled thinly. "That is not an answer. It's the true one." A murmur moved and died in the back of the room. The lawyer stepped closer. You barely know this child." Ryan's hands tightened once on the wood rail, then relaxed. I know he leaves the green dinosaur cup on the wrong side of the sink, because he thinks that means he helped. I know he asks for the same book twice when he's stalling bedtime. I know he wakes up serious and gets sillier after breakfast. I know he looks for his mother before he laughs." The courtroom went very still. Jordan's lawyer blinked, then recovered. "In less than a week, you learned all that?" "In less than a week, I paid attention." Jordan's face darkened. Michelle did not smile, but Ryan felt her approval from across the room. By the time testimony ended, the room felt thinner somehow, stripped down to its real shape. Jordan had the house, the lawyer, the polished wife, the rehearsed concern. Emma had facts, too, but more than that, she had history that could not be bought after the damage was done. And the judge gave no hint what she thought. She only said she would review everything and issue a decision soon. Outside, Emma made it to the hallway bench before her knees nearly gave way. Ryan sat beside her. Michelle spoke for a while about possibilities, timelines, next steps. Ryan caught only half of it. Emma was staring at the floor like if she looked up too fast she might shatter. When Michelle finally left, Ryan asked, "Can you breathe?" Emma laughed once, rough and tired. "Probably. I'm not interested." He waited. A few seconds later, she leaned sideways until her shoulder pressed against his arm. Neither of them called attention to it. The decision came 2 days later. The judge kept primary custody with Emma. Jordan got supervised visitation. It should have felt like a dramatic explosion, and some huge movie moment with crying and shouting and victory all at once. Instead, it felt like Emma forgetting how to stand. In the parking lot, she folded into Ryan so suddenly he had to catch her with both arms. Her face pressed into his coat. Her whole body shook with silent relief before the sound finally came. "We get to go home," she whispered. "Home. Not apartment. Not place. Home." That night, Owen fell asleep early, worn out from the tension. He had not understood, but had still somehow felt. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the rain starting again at the windows. Emma sat on the couch with her feet tucked under her. Ryan sat beside her, not touching. After a while, she said, "You can leave now." He turned to look at her. She kept her eyes on the dark window. "Not because I want you gone. I just don't want you to stay for the wrong reason." He understood then that this frightened her more than the courtroom had. Not losing the case. Wanting something after it was over. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think I'm here because I feel sorry for you?" "No." "Because of guilt?" "No." "Then what wrong reason is left?" Emma finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, defenseless, and far too honest. "Momentum." He let that sit between them. Then he said, "A kid half asleep looked at me last night and relaxed because I was still in the room. Your coffee tastes terrible, but I drink it anyway. The radiator sounds like it hates us. There's paint on your table and blocks under my shoes, and somehow this place is the first one I've wanted to come back to in years." He faced her fully. "If that's momentum, yeah, it's the most real thing that's happened to me in a long time." Emma's breath caught. Ryan reached for her hand slowly enough that she could have pulled away. She didn't. "When I signed that paper," he said, "I thought I was stepping into a crisis. I didn't know I was stepping into a life." The tears came then, but quietly. Emma laughed through them. "You really know how to say devastating things in a calm voice. It's a skill." She moved closer first. The kiss, when it came, was soft and careful, and a little disbelieving, as if both of them were still adjusting to the fact that none of this had happened in the right order, and maybe that was the point. Nothing rushed, nothing proved. It was not a rescue. It was an answer. Months passed. Ryan went back to his apartment for clothes, then more clothes, then the important things, then the things he once thought were important and no longer cared about. By the time spring leaned into Seattle, he was there more than he was anywhere else. Owen stopped asking if Ryan was coming over and started asking when Ryan would be back. One Tuesday morning, while pancakes browned on the stove, Owen looked up from the table and said, "Papa Ryan, mine needs more syrup." Ryan froze with the spatula in his hand. Emma, standing by the sink, made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh or the start of crying. With her, it was often both. Ryan crouched by Owen's chair. "You sure about that name?" Owen nodded with deep seriousness. "Because you stay." That was all. No speech, no drama. Just because you stay. Ryan kissed the top of his head and stood up before his voice had a chance to fail him. Later that spring, Aunt Emma told him she wanted a real wedding. Not because the courthouse one had not counted, but because this counted more. So they did it in her aunt's backyard, under strings of lights, and a sky finally clear after days of rain. Emma wore yellow because she said white had never been honest enough for her. Owen carried the rings with both hands and the heavy focus of a boy handling treasure. Claire came too, awkward, guarded, quiet. But when she watched Owen lean against Ryan's leg and watched Emma look at him the way people looked at safe harbor after rough water, some old hardness in her face eased. Not friendship, not repair all at once, just the first small opening. When it was Ryan's turn to speak, he did not use the vows they had printed. 7 months ago, he thought, that his whole life could still fit inside one apartment and a locked door. He took Emma's hands. "You showed up asking me to believe you before I had any reason to," he said. "I thought I was saying yes to a risk. I didn't understand I was saying yes to the best thing that would ever happen to me." Emma's mouth trembled. He went on. "I choose the hard days, the loud days, the scared days, the small kitchen, the pain on the table, the bedtime books, the truth, the mess, and the love that came in sideways and turned out to be stronger because of it. I choose you. I choose Owen. I choose this life every day." Emma wiped at her face and failed to stop crying. When she spoke, her voice shook only once. "I came to your door because I was drowning. You could have handed me a rope. Instead, you climbed into the water with me." She smiled through tears. "And then you stayed long enough to make shore feel like home." They kissed while Owen cheered loud enough for half the yard. That night, after everyone left and the lights glowed low over the grass, Ryan and Emma sat on the porch steps with the sounds of family drifting softer from inside. Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "Tell me something," she said. "Anything." "That first night, when I knocked, were you really not going to answer the door?" Ryan smiled. "For about 3 seconds. What changed?" He looked out at the dark yard, at the house lit warm behind the screen door, at the life that had not existed until somebody desperate and soaked through had pounded on his carefully protected world and refused to let silence keep winning. "You did," he said. Emma slid her hand into his. Inside, Owen laughed in his sleep from the fold-out bed where he had insisted on camping near the door after the wedding because big days made him restless. Ryan listened to that small sound and thought of the first time the boy had looked at him and asked, "Who's that?" and of all the ways love had answered since. Sometimes it did not arrive gently. Sometimes it came with rain in its hair and legal papers in its hand, and fear sharp enough to shake a voice apart. Sometimes it asked for trust before there was time to feel ready. But sometimes the strangest door you ever opened led straight into the life that had been waiting for you all along.